back for another deep dive.
Ready to go?
This time, we're tackling a pretty massive episode
Oh, yeah.
with Elon Musk.
Huge one.
It is a long one.
Yeah.
Hours and hours of conversation. So we've, as usual, gone through it, and we're going to bring you all the highlights, the really interesting, the juicy bits.
Few good stuff in there, yeah.
Everything from AI to video games to politics.
Squirrels.
And yeah, squirrels, you heard that right.
Squirrels.
So, you ready to dive in?
Absolutely.
Okay, so one of the things that really stood out to me, and I think this is sort of emblematic of Musk's thinking, the way he jumps from one thing to the next, is he was talking about how he uses video games as a personal mental acuity test. Almost like if you're working out, your body's going to tell you if something's wrong, or if you're getting sick, or if you're, injured or whatever.
Yeah.
So he's like, if I'm playing video games and I'm not doing well, that tells me something's off. And he even brought up a study about surgeons.
Yeah.
Where surgeons who play video games make something like 32% fewer errors.
It's incredible. Surgeons who play video games are better surgeons because of the hand-eye coordination, the reflexes.
But he takes it a step further and he's like, video games should be a medical school requirement.
It's such a good point. We've seen this with pilots using flight simulators, but taking it into the realm of surgery is fascinating, isn't it? It makes you wonder what other professions could benefit from this kind of virtual training.
Yeah. I mean, it really challenges that image of the gamer,
in the basement.
Just sitting in the basement eating Doritos or whatever.
Just a pizza.
He's saying, no, this is like actual cognitive enhancement. This is training.
It's skill development. Absolutely.
Yeah. So from video games, then he jumps to another really interesting topic, meat consumption and climate change.
Right.
And he just throws this bomb out there. He says that the idea that animal agriculture is the main driver of global warming is rubbish.
Yeah, this one tends to get a strong reaction. I think it's important to understand his reasoning, though. He's not saying we should all go out and eat as much meat as we can.
Right.
He's advocating for a different approach, specifically regenerative farming. Have you heard about this?
A little bit, yeah.
The idea is to focus on improving the soil, the health of the soil. And the theory is that by doing that, you can actually trap carbon rather than release it, making animal agriculture carbon neutral.
So it's not about reducing meat consumption. It's about changing the way we farm.
Precisely. He even goes so far as to suggest that cutting back on meat might have an unmeasurable impact on global warming compared to focusing on practices like regenerative agriculture.
Wow. Okay, so it's definitely a different perspective. Makes you think, are we looking in the right places?
Right, asking the right question.
Are we focusing on the right solutions?
Yeah.
Okay, so then from farms, we go to the digital town square.
Twitter,
now X.
Yeah, X.
Musk's acquisition of Twitter, he was very upfront about his reasons for buying it.
He had a mission.
He did. He said censorship, narrative control, that's what he was worried about.
Right. He specifically called out the suppression of information.
Yes. He said there was deliberate suppression of information going on. He brought up the Hunter Biden laptop story.
Of course, yeah.
The removal of Donald Trump.
Right.
He really went after the way Twitter was being run before he took over.
Right.
And his argument is that his purchase, buying Twitter, forced other platforms to be more honest.
Interesting. Yeah, kind of like a ripple effect.
Like he shook things up and it forced everyone else to be like, oh, okay, we gotta be more transparent.
Yeah, a bit more accountability.
Yeah, less censorious. So he's saying his actions actually led to positive changes on other platforms.
That's a bold claim. Does he have a point? What do you think?
It's a tough one to measure, isn't it?
It is a tough one to measure. But he's certainly putting it out there. And one of the things that he really likes about Twitter now, or X, I keep forgetting to call it X.
It's hard to adjust. It is hard to adjust.
Yeah.
One of the things he really likes about X is community notes. He's a big fan of community notes.
Yeah. Why is that?
He loves the open source nature of it, the transparency. Basically, anyone can add context to posts, fact check things, call out misinformation. It's like crowdsourcing the truth.
It's an interesting approach, almost like a built-in fact-checking system.
And he's very much against censorship.
Based on?
Well, he says the idea that people can't tell fact from fiction, that's why we have to censor things. He's like, that's ridiculous.
So he's saying, let people see the information.
Let them see the information, let them see the sources, let them decide for themselves.
It's a fascinating debate, isn't it? Freedom of information versus protecting people from misinformation.
Yeah, it's a tough one. And, he then goes on to talk about his concerns about what he sees as the erosion of fundamental rights.
What's he focusing on there?
He really emphasizes the First and Second Amendments. Freedom of speech, the right to bear arms.
Yeah.
He sees those as being really, really important. He sees the Second Amendment as being the ultimate protector of the First Amendment.
So an armed populace is a deterrent against tyranny.
Exactly. He's very concerned about government overreach, about the erosion of individual liberties. Yeah. And he even gives some real-world examples. He talks about people in the UK being arrested for Facebook posts.
Really? For Facebook posts?
Yeah. It's kind of scary when you think about it. Like, what you say online could actually get you in trouble with the government.
So he's painting a picture of a world where our freedoms are slowly being chipped away.
That's exactly what he's doing.
Yeah.
And then he drops this really weird story about SpaceX and asylum seekers.
Oh, yeah. What's that about?
It's so strange. So because of the nature of their technology, SpaceX, they're not allowed to hire anyone who isn't a permanent resident.
Sensitive technology? Rockets?
Rockets, spaceships.
Could be repurposed, I guess.
Right. Weapons.
Right.
But they're also not allowed to discriminate against asylum seekers.
Oh, wow. So they're stuck.
They're totally stuck.
What do they do?
It's a catch-22. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. And he uses this to kind of illustrate how absurd some of these government regulations are.
The unintended consequences, for sure. Interesting example.
It is. And then, speaking of absurdity, he goes on to talk about how the media portrays the world. He makes a really clear distinction between what he sees on X now and what he calls legacy media.
What's the difference?
He says that traditional media, legacy media, it presents a very biased worldview, a very skewed perspective. He gives some examples. He talks about how the media framed Biden as being under attack before a debate.
Like setting a narrative.
Exactly. Like they were trying to make him look like the victim.
Yeah.
He also talks about how J.D. Vance was constantly labeled as weird, like, oh, he's so weird, and how that was used to kind of discredit him.
Interesting. So he's saying that the media uses these labels, these narratives, to shape how people think about things.
Absolutely. And he's saying it's deliberate. He sees it as a way of controlling the narrative, of spoon-feeding people a certain perspective.
It makes you think about the information we're exposed to and where it's coming from. Who are the gatekeepers? Who's deciding what we see and hear?
It's a call to be more critical, more discerning about the information we consume. Don't just accept everything at face value.
Right. Question everything. Think for yourself.
Exactly. And then just when you think, okay, we've covered politics, technology, freedom of speech, it takes this crazy left turn. He starts talking about the Diddy factor in the 2024 election.
The Diddy factor.
Yeah. Sean Diddy Combs.
Oh, right. P. Diddy.
P. Diddy. They're talking about how he endorsed Kamala Harris.
I'm curious what Musk's take on that is.
They kind of go into Diddy's motivations. They even speculate about whether there was any pressure or compromise involved within the entertainment industry.
Interesting. So it's not just about Diddy's personal endorsement. It's about what it might represent in terms of broader forces at play.
Right. Like, is this a sign of something bigger happening? It's such a weird little detail, but they really dig into it.
It's those little details that can sometimes be the most revealing, aren't they? They can give you a glimpse behind the curtain.
And then, just when you think it can't get any weirder, we have the MAGA squirrel.
The MAGA squirrel?
The MAGA squirrel. They're talking about this incident in Texas where government agents seized and killed this guy's pet squirrel and raccoon.
What? Why?
I don't know. It's crazy. And they're using it as an example of government overreach, the erosion of personal liberties.
Like, if they can take your pet squirrel, what else can they take?
It's like a symbol, right, of how far things have gone. It's almost comical, but it's also kind of terrifying.
A little bit of both.
Yeah. And then we get back into more serious territory. They start talking about the 2024 election and the potential for a one-party state in America. And Musk, he's very concerned about this.
He sees it as a real possibility.
He does. He believes there's a deliberate strategy at play.
What kind of strategy?
He points to the surge in illegal immigration, especially in swing states.
He doesn't think it's a coincidence.
No. He thinks it's all part of a plan to create a permanent Democratic voting bloc. He even brings up how some Democratic leaders are openly advocating for policies that would fast-track citizenship for undocumented immigrants.
So he's saying they're not even trying to hide it.
He's saying it's right out in the open, and his argument is that if this continues, those swing states, they're going to become reliably blue, and then you have a situation where there's no real political competition anymore.
Essentially a one-party system.
And he uses California as an example of what he sees as the dangers of one-party rule. He talks about the state's supermajority Democratic legislature. He talks about how California recently made it illegal to show ID in any election.
That's a bold statement.
It is. And he's essentially saying that the system is rigged. It's rigged to benefit the party in power.
So what's the solution?
Well, he goes on to talk about this idea he has for a Department of Government Efficiency.
A Department of Government Efficiency. What would that do?
His vision is for a department that would be dedicated to streamlining the federal bureaucracy.
Cutting out waste?
Cutting out waste. He even talks about offering generous severance packages to displaced government employees. Like, hey, we're going to let you go, but we're going to take care of you.
It's an interesting idea, but could it actually work?
That's a good question. And from government bureaucracy, we jump to the future of work itself. AI, automation, robotics. This is where things get really, really interesting.
And a little scary too, right?
A little bit. They talk about the very real possibility of mass unemployment as machines become more and more capable.
Yeah, it's a classic sci-fi dilemma, isn't it? The robots take over our jobs. What happens to us?
And then Musk throws out this prediction that's just mind-blowing. He says that humanoid robots will outnumber humans within 20 years.
Wow.
That sounds like something out of the Jetsons.
Yeah. Everyone will have their own personal robot.
It's fascinating, but it also makes you wonder, what are the implications of that? How did that change our society, our relationships, our sense of self? Yeah, big questions. And to cap off this whirlwind tour of Elon Musk's mind, he gives us a sneak peek at Grok, his new AI chatbot.
Grok, right. I heard about this.
Yeah, and they try to get Grok to roast various topics, which is hilarious because, humor is so subjective.
It's incredibly complex to teach a machine to be funny.
And the results are, well, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
But the fact that it's even attempting humor, that's a big deal.
That's the point he's making. AI is evolving. It's not just about processing data anymore. It's starting to engage in creative endeavors.
And humor is one of the most human things there is.
It really is. So we've barely scratched the surface here. We've gone from video games to meat consumption to freedom of speech to the coming robot revolution. What stood out to you from all of this? What resonated with you?
It's amazing how Musk seamlessly connects seemingly disparate ideas. It really makes you think about the interconnectedness of everything. Yeah. And the questions he raises, they're not easy to answer.
They're not. But that's what makes this so fascinating.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's a challenge to our assumptions. A call to look at the world differently.
And to think for ourselves. Don't just accept the narratives that are being fed to us.
Be skeptical. Be curious. Keep exploring.
Exactly. And that's what we're going to keep doing in part 2 of this deep dive. Okay, so picking up where we left off, Musk's concerns about the 2024 election and this idea of a one-party state in America.
Yeah, this is where it gets really interesting because he's not just like throwing out political opinions. He actually lays out a specific strategy that he thinks is happening right now.
Like a plan.
Yeah, like a plan. And it's fascinating how he connects all these things together. So he talks about the huge increase in illegal immigration, especially in those key swing states.
Yeah, those states that could go either way in an election.
Exactly. And he's saying this isn't just a coincidence, that this is all part of a bigger plan to create this like a permanent Democratic voting bloc.
Yeah.
He even brings up, instances where you have Democratic leaders, they're openly advocating for policies that would like fast track citizenship for these undocumented immigrants.
It's like they're not even hiding it.
Right. He's like, look, they're not even hiding it. And his argument is that if this keeps happening, these swing states, they just become reliably blue, and then you don't have real political competition anymore.
Like a one-party system.
Exactly. A one-party system with all the potential problems that could lead to. And he uses California as an example of what he sees as like the dangers of one-party rule.
Right, because California's been dominated by the Democratic Party for a long time.
For decades. And he points to things like the state's supermajority Democratic legislature. He talks about the fact that California just made it illegal to show ID in any election.
Wow.
Which is a pretty radical change.
So he's basically saying the system is rigged to benefit the party in power.
And he goes even further and says that the 2024 election might be like the last chance to actually fix this, to preserve American democracy as we know it.
It's a pretty dire warning.
It is, but it's also a call to action. He's really urging people, especially men, to get out there and vote, saying that, the stakes are incredibly high. He's framing this election as a battle for, like, the soul of America.
Freedom versus tyranny.
Exactly.
It's pretty intense.
Yeah. And it kind of ties into this bigger theme that I've noticed throughout this whole conversation, this idea of like critical thinking, of not just accepting what you're told, of questioning authority. He's constantly pushing people to look beyond the headlines, to dig deeper, and to really engage with information, you know.
He's not just saying don't trust the media. He's giving specific examples of how he thinks, you know, information is being manipulated, how narratives are being created to shape how people think.
He even draws a clear distinction between like the information landscape on X, which he sees as more open, and what he calls legacy media, which he thinks is very biased.
So he's basically saying, be careful what you believe and where you're getting your information from.
Exactly. And this is especially important when you're talking about these really complex, emotionally charged topics.
Like illegal immigration, election integrity, government overreach, all these things we've been talking about.
It's easy to get caught up in the rhetoric, the fear-mongering, but he's saying, take a step back, look at the facts, think critically. And this applies regardless of your political beliefs, you know?
He's not saying you have to agree with them. He's just saying, you know, think for yourself.
Which is a powerful message, especially in today's world where everything's so polarized.
So all of this ties back to his concerns about a one-party state. He sees all these things, illegal immigration, election integrity, the erosion of free speech. He sees them all as interconnected threats to American democracy.
It's like a domino effect. One thing leads to another.
And he's saying it's all part of a larger pattern, this like deliberate attempt to consolidate power and silence dissenting voices.
It's a pretty chilling thought.
It is, but he's not just throwing out accusations.
Yeah.
He's actually making a coherent argument, and he's backing it up with examples. So it's definitely something to consider, you know. Is America really on this path toward one-party rule? And if so, what can we do to stop it?
Big questions.
Right.
But let's shift gears for a minute and talk about another layer to this whole conversation, and that's Musk's perspective on the future of technology and how it's going to impact, you know, humanity.
He's not just a tech CEO. He's like a visionary. He's always pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
He's thinking big picture, long term.
And his ideas about AI, about robotics, about automation, they're both exciting and like a little bit scary at the same time.
Because he's talking about like fundamental changes to the way we live, the way we work, the way we interact with the world.
So let's start with this prediction of his, that humanoid robots are going to outnumber humans within 20 years. I mean, it's mind-boggling when you really think about it. Like, robots are going to be as common as smartphones are today.
It sounds like science fiction, but he's very serious about it. And he sees these robots being used for all sorts of things, you know, dangerous jobs, repetitive tasks, things that humans don't want to do. But eventually he thinks they're going to become more sophisticated. They're going to be our companions, our assistants, you know.
He even joked about everybody having their own C-3PO or R2-D2.
Right. It's a funny image, but it also makes you think, what are the ethical implications of this? How does this change our relationships with each other if we're all interacting with robots all the time?
There's a lot to process.
It is. And it goes back to this idea of being proactive rather than reactive. Musk, he's not just waiting to see what happens with all this technology. He's actively trying to shape it through his work with Tesla, with SpaceX, with Neuralink.
He's not just predicting the future, he's building it.
Exactly. And he's challenging us to do the same, to think critically about the future that we want to create and to actually take action to make it happen.
So as we wrap up this second part of our deep dive, let's just consider this question. What kind of future do we want to create? What are our values? What are our principles? And how can we use these incredible technological advancements to benefit all of humanity?
Because the future isn't predetermined. It's up to us to decide what it's going to look like.
And that brings us to one of the most fascinating parts of this whole episode, Musk's demo of Grok, his new AI chatbot. And we're going to dive into that in part 3. All right, so we've explored some pretty heavy stuff.
Yeah, a lot to unpack.
A lot to unpack, but let's circle back to something a little bit more, I guess, lighthearted, but still incredibly insightful. And that was Musk's demo of Grok.
Grok, the AI chatbot.
Yeah, the AI chatbot, right. And it's, you know, it's easy to just kind of dismiss this as, oh, this is just some fun and games with AI. But I think it actually goes a lot deeper than that. Remember, he's not just trying to build a chatbot that can, you know, tell jokes. He's trying to create an AI that can actually understand and engage with, like, the complexities of human language and culture.
And humor is like the ultimate test of that, isn't it? I mean, have you ever tried to explain a joke to someone who doesn't get it? It's impossible almost.
Well, it's hard.
It relies on so much shared context, timing, cultural references. How do you program that into a machine?
Exactly. So when Musk and Rogan are trying to get Grok to roast various topics, the results are kind of hit or miss.
Sometimes it works, sometimes it's like, what?
But the point is that AI is even attempting humor. That's a huge step forward.
It is. It's a sign that AI is evolving. It's becoming more sophisticated. It's not just about, processing data and completing tasks anymore. It's starting to engage in these creative endeavors.
Right. And Musk, he sees this as, AI is not just a tool for automation and efficiency, but it could actually be a partner in creativity.
A collaborator.
A collaborator, helping us push the boundaries of art, music, writing, maybe even stand-up comedy. Who knows?
Who knows? Yeah, why not?
And it kind of brings us back to this fundamental question that we keep bumping up against, which is, what does it mean to be human in this age of increasingly sophisticated AI? If machines can do everything that we can do, but better, what role is left for us?
It's a question that a lot of people are wrestling with right now, and it can be a little bit unsettling,
Existential crisis.
Yeah, but I think Musk offers a more optimistic perspective on this. He says that we should focus on what makes us uniquely human.
Things
like our creativity, our empathy, our ability to connect with each other on a deeper level. Those are things that machines, at least for now, can't replicate.
He sees AI as a way to free us from those mundane tasks, so we can focus on the things that actually bring us joy and purpose and meaning.
It's like AI could handle all the busy work of life, and then we're free to pursue our passions, our dreams, the things that really matter.
So instead of fearing AI as this, threat, he sees it as an opportunity to kind of redefine what it means to be human.
Yeah, it's a shift in perspective, isn't it? It's not humans versus machines. It's humans and machines working together, each leveraging their own unique strengths to create something better.
And that's a much more hopeful vision than those dystopian scenarios we see in all those sci-fi movies.
Killer robots.
Exactly. And it goes back to this idea of being proactive, right?
Right.
He's not just sitting around waiting for the future to happen. He's actually out there trying to shape it through his work, through his ideas.
He's a doer.
Yeah.
And he's challenging us to do the same, to think critically about the future that we want and then actually take action to make it happen.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of Elon Musk, I think the takeaway here is this. The future isn't something to be afraid of. It's an opportunity.
It's a chance to redefine what it means to be human, to explore new possibilities, to build a better world.
For ourselves and for, generations to come. And it all starts with each of us taking responsibility.
Taking responsibility for our own choices, our own actions, our own contributions to the future.
So keep exploring, keep questioning, keep pushing the boundaries. And until next time, keep diving deep.